Power is usually about control, who holds it, who enforces it, and who dares to challenge it. But what happens when someone refuses to play by those rules? When an unstoppable force meets a man who won't move, not because he's resisting, but because he simply doesn't have to. That's exactly what happened on a quiet afternoon in an upscale plaza, where an NYPD officer, used to commanding fear, came face to face with someone unlike anyone he had ever dealt with before. A legend. A man who understood that real power isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It just is. At first, it was just another patrol, another day, another opportunity to remind the world who was in charge. But what started as a simple demand for respect turned into something much bigger. This wasn't just an argument. It wasn't just a fight. It was a moment that exposed the truth about strength, respect, and the fragile nature of authority built on fear. What happened next left the officer stunned, the crowd speechless, and the internet buzzing for weeks. Stay with me till the end, because this isn't just a story. It's a lesson in what true power really looks like. The plaza sat high above the noise of the city, a sleek, modern space where polished marble reflected the afternoon sun. Lounge chairs were arranged neatly around reflective pools, their surfaces rippling gently in the breeze. Soft music drifted through hidden speakers, blending with the distant hum of traffic below. It was a place where artists, executives, and dreamers crossed paths, a rare corner of the city where chaos slowed down, at least for some. Officer Mark Steele moved through the plaza with the weight of authority pressing against his broad shoulders. His uniform was spotless, his polished boots clicking against the stone with each step. He was a man who believed in order, in clear rules, in immediate respect. Compliance wasn't a request. It was expected. His reputation stretched far beyond his precinct. Some said he could silence a room with a single glare. He didn't believe in second chances, only in making sure no one forgot who was in charge. A few steps away, Snoop Dogg leaned back in his chair, iced tea in hand, legs crossed, completely at ease. His signature shades hid his eyes, but his body language spoke loud enough, calm, collected, untouchable. The world outside rushed forward, but he moved at his own pace. He wasn't challenging anyone. He wasn't causing trouble. He was simply existing, comfortable in a way that made others uncomfortable. And that, for a man like Officer Steele, was enough of a problem. Officer Steele's eyes locked onto the man lounging in the corner of the plaza, while others walked with purpose, chatted in groups, or tapped away on their phones. This man sat still, too still, legs crossed, one arm draped over the chair, sipping iced tea like he had all the time in the world. To most, it was nothing. To Steele, it was something. A problem. In his world, stillness wasn't just relaxation, it was defiance. And defiance needed to be corrected. His boots struck the marble with sharp, deliberate steps as he made his way over. The easygoing hum of the plaza began to fade, the natural rhythm of conversation interrupted by the presence of authority in motion. A young artist sketching near the fountains paused midline. A barista at the coffee stand glanced up, sensing the shift in the air. The unspoken rule of the city, stay out of trouble, was about to be tested. Steele stopped just inches away, looming over the seated figure. His voice cut through the music, through the murmurs of people now watching. Get up. Show some respect. It wasn't a request. It never was. Snoop didn't move. Didn't even look up right away. Instead, he took another slow sip of his drink, ice clinking softly against the glass. Then, finally, a faint smile. Respect is earned, not commanded, homie. Steele's patience was wearing thin. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not in public, and definitely not by someone sitting so casually, like none of this mattered. His fingers curled into a fist before flexing open again. His jaw clenched, his pulse steady but hard. He'd given an order. It should have been followed. His hand drifted toward his baton, fingers brushing against the handle, gripping it just tight enough to remind himself it was there. It had always been his answer to resistance. His voice dropped lower, sharper. This is your last chance. The warning wasn't just for Snoop. It was for everyone watching, a reminder that he was still in control. Snoop finally looked up, tilting his head slightly, adjusting his sunglasses, with one hand. No fear. No tension. Just that same effortless calm. "You sure you want to do this, man?" His voice was smooth, almost amused, like he already knew how this was going to end. That was it. Steele didn't hesitate. In one swift motion, he yanked the baton free and swung, fast, hard, straight for Snoop's arm. Crack! The impact echoed through the plaza. Conversation stopped. Someone gasped. A phone slipped from a hand, hitting the floor. But Snoop, he didn't flinch, didn't wince, didn't react the way Steele expected. Instead, before Steele could even process what had happened, Snoop's hand moved, smooth, precise, controlled. In a blink, he caught Steele's wrist, guiding the momentum away like it was nothing. And then clatter. The baton slipped from Steele's grip and hit the ground between them. The sound rang through the silence, heavier than it should have. Steele's breath caught in his throat. The plaza wasn't just watching anymore. It was waiting. Steele didn't move. His fingers twitched, but his body stayed locked in place, like his mind was still catching up to what just happened. The baton, his baton, lay useless on the ground. He had swung with full force, expecting impact, expecting control. Instead, he was the one standing there empty-handed. The weight of 100 eyes pressed down on him. Conversations had stopped. The teenage artist who had been sketching moments ago sat frozen, pencil hovering over the page. A barista, halfway through pouring a drink, held the cup still, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in front of her. Snoop exhaled slowly, leaning back like he had all the time in the world. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just let the moment settle. Then, in that same steady, measured tone, he spoke. "Ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how cool you stay when the storm comes." Steele's chest rose and fell with deep, uneven breaths. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had dealt with tough guys before, men who barked back, who made it clear they were ready to fight. That he understood. But this was different. Snoop hadn't fought back at all. He just took control, without needing to lift a fist. And worst of all, Steele knew the crowd saw it too. Desperation crept in. His hand dropped toward his holster. If force wouldn't work, maybe fear would. But just as his fingers brushed against the grip of his firearm, another hand moved. Smooth. Effortless. Before Steele could even react, Snoop's fingers wrapped around his wrist, calm, steady, unshakable. And just like that, the gun was no longer his. Steele stood there, completely disarmed. Steele's world was unraveling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Phones were out, cameras rolling, capturing every second, every shift in power. The legend of what had just happened was already spreading before the moment had even ended. Snoop sat there, still as calm as ever, while Steele stood frozen, exposed. No badge, no baton, no gun. Just a man who had spent his entire career believing that control was something you could hold in your hands. And now, those hands were empty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some whispered in disbelief. Others exchanged glances that said everything. Did that really just happen? A few recorded in silence, knowing this was something people would talk about for a long time. Then, a new presence stepped forward. Lieutenant Holt. Older, wiser. The kind of cop who had seen men rise and fall, who understood that real power wasn't about weapons or uniforms. It was about how you carried yourself. He looked at Steele, then at Snoop, then back at Steele. He didn't yell. Didn't need to. "Give me your badge." Steele's breath hitched. The words hit harder than any baton ever could. His badge, his symbol of authority, his shield, his identity. He had worn it like armor for years. Now it felt like a weight. With trembling hands, he unpinned it and placed it into Holt's waiting palm. The metal gleamed under the plaza's lights for a second before disappearing into Holt's grip. And just like that, it was over. Steele wasn't a force to be feared anymore. He was just another man who had mistaken control for respect, and lost both in the process. Snoop reached for his iced tea, lifted it to his lips, and took another slow sip. No rush, no change in rhythm, just the same effortless calm he had from the start. Around him, the city kept moving. The conversations, the footsteps, the clinking of glasses, all of it carried on. But something was different now. The people who had witnessed what happened would never forget it. The balance of power had shifted, and the world knew it. By the time the sun set, The internet had already taken over. Clips of the moment spread like wildfire. Headlines, memes, debates. He didn't fight. He just won. A graffiti artist painted a mural in the heart of the city. Snoop's silhouette against the sunset. The words "peace over power" stretching across the wall. In a Harlem classroom, a teacher asked, "Is true power louder in silence?" A group of students leaned in, eager to answer. Meanwhile, Steele walked alone through the streets, head low, hands in his pockets. At a newsstand, his name was plastered across a front page. A picture of him at the plaza, caught mid-defeat. He used to be the man who controlled rooms with a stare. Now, he was just another lesson in what happens when authority is built on fear instead of respect. Power isn't about badges, weapons, or uniforms. It's about knowing who you are when the world tries to shake you. And Snoop Dogg, he didn't just prove it, he lived it. What do you think? Did Snoop Dogg just change the meaning of power? Was this a lesson in control, respect, or something even deeper? If you were in this situation, how would you have handled it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call. Moments like these make us question what real strength looks like. And if you want more stories that challenge what we think we know, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. There's always more to uncover.